Everyone talks about investing as if it's this, exclusive members-only club. You see the news, the headlines, they're always focused on huge amounts of money, right? People talking about managing six-figure portfolios or day trading, these really complex things, or turning like 10,000 into 100,000. And if you were sitting there maybe, just trying to make rent, thinking, look, I've got debt, I can barely scrape together $50, forget thousands. Well, that feeling, that frustration is totally valid. And honestly, it's why most people just stop. Before they even begin, they feel completely paralyzed by how big the challenge seems and how much money they think they need just to get in the door. But the sources we've looked at today, they offer a completely different angle, a really liberating one, actually. They cut through all that noise and boil it down to something powerful, how much money you start with. It almost doesn't matter. You don't need thousands. What you need is a plan, a simple, mechanical, repeatable plan. And based on everything we've dug into, that plan starts with just one surprisingly small amount. Your first $10.
That's exactly it. That's the core idea we really want to unpack today. We're aiming to strip away all the complexity, the jargon, the intimidation that makes investing feel so out of reach for so many people. Our mission here in this deep dive is to give you, especially if you're an absolute beginner, the detailed step-by-step blueprint. Pulled straight from the sources, we're going to show you exactly where to start, what specific funds to look at these diversified ones, and maybe most importantly, how to set things up so your money starts growing automatically, even if you've never even downloaded a finance app before.
Yeah, we're talking about building this little machine, a machine for financial consistency that just runs in the background of your life without you having to constantly fiddle with it. Okay, so let's unpack this blueprint. And we really have to start with the toughest part, because it's not actually about the money itself initially. It's about changing how you think about money.
Completely.
So the journey really kicks off by tackling what our sources call the waiting game assumption.
Ah, yes, the waiting game. This is like the psychological landmine that trips up, I'd say, maybe 90% of beginners easily. They tell themselves, investing, that's something I'll do later. When I have a big emergency fund, or when my student loans are gone, or when I get that next big promotion, only then will they start.
But the core insight we found really flips that whole idea on its head. The argument is that investing, fundamentally, it's not about how much money you have right now. It's about learning a skill, a crucial skill. It's about understanding how money grows and then making a commitment to being consistent.
And this ties right into the discipline angle, which, honestly, might be the most undervalued part of building wealth. Think about it. If you struggle with financial discipline now, if that $10 easily disappears on impulse buys, maybe a fancy coffee you didn't really need, you need to train that discipline muscle. Because if you can't manage the commitment of just $10 consistently, how on earth are you suddenly going to have the discipline needed for $10,000 or $100,000 when you eventually get there? Starting small isn't a weakness. It's not a compromise. It's essential training, discipline training.
I think that's such a key distinction.
Yeah.
That $10 deposit, it's not just putting money away. It's like paying tuition.
For a lifelong skill.
Right. It changes the whole thing from just a transaction into, an act of self-improvement.
Yeah.
And the sources are crystal clear on this. What actually builds sustainable wealth isn't the size of that first deposit. It's the habit, the ingrained, automated habit of investing early and investing often. Every single successful investor, every millionaire out there, they all started with that first, probably pretty small, maybe even awkward deposit.
Yes, exactly. And we have to tackle that common confusion head on too. So many people think, okay, rich people invest, so first I need to get rich, then I'll invest. But the reality is the complete opposite. The people who build real lasting wealth, they invest so that they can become wealthy. The small, consistent action has to come before the big result. It's cause and effect. You start building a skyscraper with one brick, right? You don't wait until you can afford the whole wall before you lay the first one.
Okay, so if hurdle number one is ditching that waiting game mentality, hurdle number two is getting really clear on the difference between saving and investing, because beginners often, kind of mush them together, treat them like they're the same thing.
And they're absolutely not. This distinction is critical, because if you use the wrong tool for the job, you're setting yourself up to fail. Saving and investing, they serve entirely separate purposes, even though, yes, both involve setting money aside.
All right, so let's define them based on what we've read. Saving. That's purely defensive, isn't it? It's money you need to keep safe.
Yeah.
Easily accessible. Usually in a savings account, maybe a high yield one if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Because you might need it soon, like next month or next year for emergencies. Its main job is protection. It's like an insurance policy against, life being unpredictable. It has to be stable.
Exactly. Investing, on the other hand, has an offensive goal, a growth goal. When you invest that $10, you're essentially saying, okay, I don't need this $10 today. You're giving up immediate access to it so that it can go out into the economy, into companies, into real assets with the mission to multiply, to grow, to ultimately set you free, financially speaking, down the road. If saving is keeping your money safe inside the fortress, investing is sending your money out into the world on a mission of conquest and multiplication.
And this is where that huge opportunity cost comes in if you confuse the two. If you save $10 in a regular old bank account, what's the interest? Like 0.01% a year, maybe. It's basically nothing. It's not even keeping up with inflation most of the time. So it's safe, sure, but it's stagnant. Over decades, its actual buying power shrinks.
Right. Now, compare that stagnation, that near zero growth, with the potential power of the market. Even considering, yes, there's volatility, there's risk involved, but that same $10 invested and given decades to grow thanks to that engine we call compounding, it has the potential to grow 10 times over, 20 times, maybe even 50 times its original value. The goal of investing isn't to avoid any loss. You accept some short-term risk, some ups and downs for that potential long-term reward. The real goal is leverage, using time as your lever.
That comparison, zero growth versus potentially exponential growth.
Yeah.
That really should be the thing that clicks for people. That motivates you. The goal isn't trying to get rich quick next week. It's not gambling. It's just planting that first seed.
Yeah.
That first $10 seed. You need to shift your identity mentally from just being a saver, someone who protects money, to being an investor, an intentional, patient gardener of your money.
And that distinction is also crucial for your own peace of mind, your psychological safety. You should never invest money that you might need for, next month's rent or an unexpected car repair. That money absolutely has to be saved. That's your emergency fund. Keep it safe. The $10 we're talking about today, that's surplus. That's money you are intentionally setting aside for a totally different timeline, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. If you mix those up, if you invest your emergency money, you're just setting yourself up for panic and probably failure.
Okay, so once we've made that mental shift,
Right.
committed to being a grower of money, not just a protector, we get to engage with what's often called, maybe a bit dramatically, the eighth wonder of the world, compound interest.
Ah, yes. And what's really amazing here, especially for you, the listener who's maybe thinking about starting with just that $10, is how incredibly democratic compounding is. It genuinely doesn't care how much money you start with or how big your account is right now. Compound interest only cares about two things. One, how consistently you add to it. And two, maybe even more importantly, how long your money stays invested and working.
That's huge. That's such a liberating thought, isn't it? Because it immediately shifts the focus away from the size of your paycheck, something you maybe can't change overnight, and it puts the focus squarely on the clock, on time, which you can start using immediately. For a beginner, time is arguably your single biggest financial asset, the most powerful one you have.
Let's make this really concrete, though, because just talking about it doesn't quite capture the sheer power over the long haul. We need to use the numbers, the data from the sources, to really show that famous hockey stick curve, that exponential growth.
Okay, let's walk through it. Imagine you stick to the plan. You invest just $10 every single week. That's probably manageable for most people, right? Maybe it's skipping one takeout coffee or canceling a streaming service you don't watch much.
Seems trivial, maybe. But if you keep that automated consistency going for 10 years, your total out-of-pocket investment, the actual cash you put in, is $5,200. Now, using a modest long-term historical average return, let's say 8% per year, that $5,200 grows to roughly $7,500. Okay, maybe not life-changing yet.
It's a solid start. You've essentially earned an extra $2,300 just by letting it grow. Right. And those first 10 years, they're often the hardest psychologically. It's the patience phase. It feels slow because most of the money in the account is still the money you put in, your principal. It's doing most of the work.
Yeah.
But now you've built a foundation. You've got $7,500 that's constantly working, constantly generating its own growth.
Exactly. Now the magic starts to accelerate. Let's jump forward another decade. So we're at the 20-year mark. You've diligently kept up that $10 a week. For 2 full decades, your total contribution, your principal, is now $10,400. That's the money you actually earned and saved. But thanks to those earlier returns, starting to earn returns of their own, that's the compounding kicking in the total value has ballooned to approximately $26,000.
Whoa, hang on. So you put in $10,400 of your own money, but the account is worth $26,000. That means over $15,000 more than half the total value is pure earnings, growth generated by the money itself. Money you didn't have to work an extra minute for. Okay, now the engine is really starting to warm up.
Yes. And this is where you see that graph really start to curve upwards sharply. This is exactly why we keep saying time is the ultimate leverage. Now, let's zoom out. Let's look at the full long-term picture, the real potential. If you, the person listening right now, maybe you're 25, if you start today with that $10 a week and you maintain that simple commitment until a typical retirement age, let's say 65, that's a full 40 years. The results, they're genuinely stunning.
Okay, so 40 years, $10 a week. That means your total deposited principal, the money you actually put in from your pocket over those 4 decades, is only $20,800.
Correct. Just $20,800 contributed by you. But that compounding engine, running consistently, relentlessly for 40 years, it transforms that modest contribution into a portfolio worth over $300,000.
$300,000. That's actually mind-blowing. Let me just make sure I heard that right, and everyone listening gets this. You put in just over $20,000 of your own money, bit by bit, over 40 years, and you end up with $300,000. That means roughly $279,200, almost the entire amount, is pure growth, generated purely by time and consistency, without you ever needing to invest more than that initial $10 a week.
This analysis really should fundamentally change how you think about building wealth. It's not about one big, risky, brilliant move. That's mostly luck or fiction. Real wealth is built slowly, quietly, consistently, and those earliest years, the ones where the growth feels painfully slow, they are paradoxically the most valuable years, because that's when you're laying the foundation, building the base for the massive compounding that takes off in the later decades.
Which is why that $10 right now, today, is so incredibly important. It's the action that starts the clock. It's what initiates that potential $279,000 compounding journey. Until you make that first deposit, your growth rate is zero, flatline. The second that $10 gets invested, even if it's just earning fractions of a penny at first, the process has begun. Micro growth is happening. Okay, that transition from the sort of philosophical commitment and the mind-bending math, it moves us perfectly into the practical stuff, the how-to. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think, because we're moving from the theory to the actual 4 essential steps, the steps you need to take to automate this wealth creation thing, starting literally today. All right, step 1, you need the vehicle, the tool, the place to actually do the investing. That's the brokerage account or the investment app. You can't just, wish your money into the stock market. You need a formal, regulated platform, a launch pad for your funds.
Think of it like your personal investment laboratory, but one designed specifically to handle these small, regular, automatic inputs. And choosing the right platform is actually really important for a beginner, starting with just $10, because we need to make every single dollar count. And we need to eliminate any unnecessary friction or costs.
So if I'm that beginner, totally new to this, what are the absolute must-haves? What are the, say, 3 non-negotiable things I should look for when picking this launchpad?
Yeah, the sources are pretty clear on this. Number 1, low or zero fees. Specifically, no commission fees for trading the kinds of investments we'll talk about. In the old days, you used to pay a commission, maybe $5 or $10 every single time you bought or sold a stock. If you're investing $10 and you pay a $5 commission, that's insane. Half your investment is gone instantly. So you absolutely need a modern platform that offers commission-free trading, especially for ETFs and index funds. Okay, number 2, the ability to start with small amounts. And crucially, this means supporting fractional shares. We'll come back to that, but it's key. You're starting with $10. You can't use some old school broker that demands a $5,000 minimum just to open an account. You need a place that welcomes small beginnings. And number 3, and this ties directly back to our consistency theme, the platform must allow you to automate everything. Automate the deposits from your bank and automate the investment itself. You should be able to set it up once, link your bank account, tell it every Friday, take $10 and buy this specific fund, and then forget about it. If you have to remember to manually log in and transfer the money and make the purchase every single week, well, life gets busy, you'll forget, willpower fails. Automation is the secret weapon for discipline here.
Okay, that makes sense. And for our listeners in the U.S., the sources actually give some concrete examples of platforms that generally tick these boxes, right? Places like Fidelity, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, some of the big established names, or newer, often app-based brokers like Robinhood or maybe M1 Finance. These are generally built for this low-cost, low-minimum approach.
Exactly. And if you're listening from outside the U.S., the core advice is the same. Look for local platforms in your country that offer commission-free trading, low minimums, fractional shares if possible, and access to index funds or ETFs. But here's the really important part. Don't get stuck here. Don't spend 6 months researching the absolute perfect broker. The platform is just the tool. Find one that meets those 3 key criteria: low fees, low minimums, fractional shares, automation, and then immediately move on to step 2. Action is more important than perfection here.
All right, step 1. Get the vehicle, the account. Step 2, choose the payload. What are we actually putting our $10 into? And the guidance here is really firm for beginners. Forget about trying to pick individual stocks. That's basically gambling when you're starting out. Instead, the safest, most effective starting point is one of these diversified things called an exchange-traded fund, an ETF.
Yeah, the basket analogy is helpful, but let's maybe unpack the mechanics a bit more. When you buy just one share or even a fraction of a share of a broad market ETF, you are instantly buying tiny pieces of hundreds, sometimes thousands of different companies. The whole philosophy behind this $10 strategy isn't about betting on Apple or Tesla or some hot new company to succeed. It's about betting on the overall success of the entire economy, or at least a very large chunk of it.
And the big advantage there is diversification, right? It's like built-in safety. If one company you happen to own a tiny pieces of maybe some small tech stock inside the ETF, if it completely fails, goes bankrupt. It barely even registers in your overall portfolio value because you own tiny pieces of hundreds of other successful, profitable companies alongside it.
Precisely. And we specifically focus on index ETFs. These are passive funds. They're not trying to actively beat the market. They're just trying to match the performance of a major market index, like the S&P 500. Why is that important? Because it means the management fees are incredibly low, tiny, often fractions of a % per year. This maximizes how much of the market's return actually ends up in your pocket, and it requires zero research from you. You don't need to analyze company balance sheets. You just need to have faith that overall the 500 biggest companies in the US or the entire global market will likely be worth more in 10 or 20 years than they are today, which historically has been a very good bet.
Okay, this is great. And the sources simplify it even more by giving specific examples, specific tickers. You really only need to pick one of these to get started. Let's name a few of the common ones mentioned. So if you want to focus primarily on the growth of the big US companies, you might look at VOO or SPY. These both track the S&P 500 index. That's the top 500 or so largest publicly traded companies in America.
Right. Or if you want even broader U.S. exposure, you could look at something like VPI. That covers pretty much the entire U.S. stock market, large companies, medium ones, small ones. It's like betting on the whole American business ecosystem. And then if you want maximum global diversification, maybe you want exposure to companies in Europe, Asia, everywhere there are ETFs like ET. That one includes companies from all around the world, including the U.S. But the rule of thumb is absolutely key here. Keep it simple, especially at the start. Just pick one broad, diversified, low-cost index ETF. That is absolutely plenty.
Okay, wait, I have to jump in here because the skeptical beginner listening is thinking exactly what I'm thinking right now. I just quickly looked up VOO. One share. It costs like over $400 right now. If I only have $10, how am I supposed to buy something that costs $400 a share? Doesn't the whole plan just fall apart right here?
That is probably the single most important practical question. And the answer is the magic key that unlocks this whole $10 strategy. Fractional shares. You're absolutely right. Traditionally, if a share cost $400, you needed $400 cash to buy one share, period. But most modern brokerages, especially the ones aimed at beginners that we mentioned earlier, allow you to buy pieces of a share, fractions. So with your $10, you're not buying one whole share of VOO. You're buying, let's see, $10 divided by $400, you're buying 0.025 shares of VOO, or about 2.5% of one share.
Okay. So the brokerage platform itself basically chops up those expensive shares into tiny, affordable, bite-sized pieces for you.
Exactly right. And this feature is absolutely non-negotiable for this strategy. If a brokerage you're looking at does not offer fractional shares for ETFs, you simply cannot execute this $10 plan effectively. Fractional shares are what truly democratize investing. They give everyone access to high-quality, diversified investments, regardless of how much money you have to start. They are the absolute key to making sure your $10 gets diversified immediately and starts working for you.
All right, we've got the account. We've picked our one simple ETF. We know we can buy fractions of it. And we get to the core of that consistency machine we talked about. Automation. Step 3 is actually setting up that weekly automatic non-negotiable investment, putting that $10 to work every single week without fail.
Yes. This is the step that transforms investing from something you have to actively think about, maybe stress about, into just a passive background process, like paying a utility bill, almost. $10 a week. That works out to about $40, maybe $45 a month, depending on the month. For the vast majority of people, that amount is genuinely small enough that you probably won't even notice it missing from your day-to-day spending.
But the contrast there is so stark, isn't it? While that tiny amount likely won't change your lifestyle today, setting up this automated habit, that's what radically changes your future wealth trajectory. Just like we saw with that $300,000 projection.
And this step is also where we put a really important investment strategy into practice automatically. It's called dollar cost averaging, usually shortened to DCA. DCA is simply the practice of investing a fixed amount of money, in our case, $10 at regular intervals every week, regardless of what the market is doing. High, low, sideways, doesn't matter. The $10 goes in.
So the automation is basically the tool, the mechanism that makes DCA happen consistently.
Okay, so why is DCA considered so powerful, especially for beginners? Because it completely takes the guesswork, the emotion, and the impossible task of timing the market out of the equation. Let's be honest, predicting short-term market moves is impossible, even for the professionals with supercomputers, let alone for us regular folks or beginners. If you try to wait for the perfect time to buy low, you might wait forever. You might miss weeks, months, even years of potential growth and compounding while you're sitting on the sidelines. With DCA, because you're investing that same $10 every week, sometimes you'll buy when the market is high, meaning your $10 buys fewer shares. But critically, sometimes you'll buy when the market dips, meaning your $10 automatically buys more shares at a cheaper price. By automating it, you remove the temptation to make emotional decisions based on scary headlines or market hype. You just commit to the schedule. So when the market does inevitably dip and everyone else is panicking, your automated system is quietly, unemotionally buying up more shares at a discount for you. That is the genius of combining automation and DCA. It forces disciplined behavior. It's the ultimate expression of that principle we keep coming back to. Consistency beats intensity. Every time.
That's a really powerful connection. That automated $10 going in week after week, rain or shine, for 10, 20, 40 years. Its long-term power just dwarfs trying to make one big, perfectly timed $1,000 investment that you stress over and then probably forget about. The discipline gets baked right into the software.
Okay, so the account's open, the ETF is chosen, the $10 weekly automation is humming along in the background. You'd think you're done, right? But step 4 requires a different kind of discipline. It's psychological, emotional discipline. This is where the human element, our own brain, often tries to sabotage the beautiful machine we've just built.
Yeah, because we have to just state the truth, even if it's uncomfortable. The stock market goes up and down. It's volatile. It always has been. It always will be. These daily, weekly, even monthly fluctuations. The sources often refer to this as noise. And the absolute classic beginner mistake is getting sucked into listening to that noise. How? By checking their investment app every single day.
Oh, it's poison. When you check your little $10 a week investment daily, you will see it go down sometimes. You will see fluctuations. One day, your $50 total might be worth $49. The next day, maybe $50.50. Your immediate gut reaction, especially when it dips, is often fear, panic, which inevitably leads to freaking out, as the sources put it. And freaking out translates into bad decisions, stopping the automation until things calm down, or even worse, panic selling when the price is low, locking in a loss permanently.
It's like planting a seed in your garden, right? You wouldn't dig it up every single morning to see if the roots are growing, would you? Of course not.
Right.
You'd kill the poor plant. You trust the process. You water it, give it sun, and let time do its work. Yet that's exactly what investors do when they obsessively check their portfolio's daily performance. They dig up the seed.
The successful strategy, the one outlined consistently in the sources, is actually remarkably simple, if not always easy emotionally. Just don't look very often. Check your portfolio maybe once a quarter, or even just twice a year. Really, only often enough to make sure the automation is still running correctly. And maybe to just reaffirm your commitment to the long-term plan. You want to see the big picture. That long-term growth curve we talked about, the one that takes years and decades to build. You're looking for the hockey stick growth over 5 years, not the 20-cent wiggle over 2 days.
So we really need to redefine what the investor's job actually is here for this strategy. Your role isn't to be a market guru. It's not to predict recessions or booms. Your only job as a consistent $10 a week automated DCA investor is simply to stay invested, to keep the machine running, ensure that automatic contribution continues uninterrupted through thick and thin.
Exactly. It all comes down to that golden rule of long-term investing, which is worth repeating. Time in the market is far more important than trying to time the market. You cannot successfully time the market consistently over decades. It's a fool's errand. But you can always maximize your total time in the market. By automating your investment and then consciously ignoring the short-term noise, you ensure that your $10 is getting the maximum possible benefit from the power of time and compounding. So building that consistent investment machine, getting through those 4 steps, that's a huge huge achievement. That sets the table for success. But unfortunately, that's only half the battle. The other half is actively avoiding the psychological traps, the common mistakes that derail so many well-intentioned people, especially beginners. The sources highlight 4 really common ones. Hashtag tag tag 4.1, the 4 traps that derail beginners.
Okay, let's break these down. Think of them as landmines on the path. If you can just learn to spot them and walk around them, you immediately put yourself way ahead of the curve, like ahead of 90% of other beginners. So, trap number 1, trying to pick individual stocks too early. This is the classic betting mistake, right? You start the sensible $10 a week ETF plan. It's going okay, maybe up a little after 3 weeks. But then you read some exciting article or see something on social media about a hot stock, maybe a meme stock or some new tech company, and you start thinking, this boring ETF isn't growing fast enough. I could make way more money on this stock. So you cancel the automation, pull your $30 out, and put it all on that one single company.
The psychology driving that is usually a mix of greed and impatience. The desire for that instant gratification, that quick win. Diversified index ETFs, by design, deliver slow, steady, boring returns. They're built for compounding over 40 years, remember. Individual stocks offer the adrenaline rush, the possibility, however remote, of doubling your money next week. But beginners almost always lack the skills, the research tools, the understanding of company valuations, and frankly, the risk tolerance needed to manage that kind of concentrated risk effectively. The advice is really strong here. Stick with broad diversification until your investment foundation is much, much larger. Maybe once you have $50,000 or $100,000 invested, then you can consider allocating a small percentage to individual picks if you must, but not with your first $10 or $100 or $1,000.
Okay, that makes sense. Keep it boring, especially at the start. Trap number 2, comparing your results to other people's. So you're doing your $10 a week into VOO. It's chugging along. Maybe you're up 5% for the year so far. Feels okay. But then your coworker starts bragging about how they made 50% on some speculative bet. Or you see these insane gains posted online somewhere. Suddenly, your steady 5% feels inadequate. You start feeling doubt, maybe envy, that classic FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Oh, comparison is absolute poison for a long-term investor. It's toxic. Your investment journey is unique. It has to be tailored to your goals, your timeline, your ability to handle risk. The strategy we're outlining, the guaranteed, boring, compounding approach, is designed for building reliable financial security over decades. It will always look slow compared to someone else's short-term speculative gamble that happened to pay off, and they rarely mention the ones that didn't. You absolutely have to put blinders on, focus entirely on your own automated process, your own long-term goals, and just ignore all that external noise and bragging. As the sources often remind us, the truly wealthy people, the ones who built it slowly and quietly, they rarely broadcast their net worth or their latest stock picks on social media. Keep your eyes on your own paper.
Good advice. Okay, trap number 3, investing money you might need soon. This often gets framed as investing money you can't afford to lose. We already talked about the difference between saving for short-term needs, emergencies, and investing for long-term growth 5+ years out. This trap is about blurring those lines.
Exactly. If you violate that fundamental rule, if you take your emergency fund money, the cash you've set aside for a potential job loss or a sudden medical bill, and you put it into the stock market because you want it to grow faster, you're breaking the system. Specifically, you're violating step 4, the ignore the noise long-term view principle. Because if the market suddenly drops 20% right when your emergency happens, you don't have the luxury of waiting for it to recover. You are forced to sell your investments at a low point, locking in a potentially huge loss simply because you need the cash now. Investment money must be surplus capital, money you are confident you won't need to touch for at least 5, ideally 10 or more years. It's designated for long-term growth, not short-term access.
Right, keep those pots of money completely separate. And finally, trap number 4, stopping the consistent investment when the market drops. This sounds like the classic panic reaction. You see scary headlines, recession looms, market crashes, your account balance dips a bit, maybe you're down 10% overall. And your instinct is to hit pause. Stop the automatic $10 contributions just until things feel safer or until the crash is over.
This is probably the most financially damaging trap of them all, because it completely undermines the power of dollar cost averaging, the very strategy designed to help you through downturns. Remember, when the market drops, the shares of your index fund become cheaper. Your automatic $10 contribution, which is fixed, now buys more shares than it did the week before when prices were higher. You're automatically buying assets on sale. Stopping your investment during a downturn is like seeing your favorite store announce a 20% off sale and deciding not to go shopping. It makes no sense. You're forfeiting the golden opportunity to accumulate more shares at lower prices. DCA requires you to be unemotional, robot-like almost, especially when the market feels scary. You have to trust the system and let it keep buying, knowing that historically markets always recover and those shares bought cheap will fuel future growth.
Wow. Okay, so avoiding those four. Don't speculate early, don't compare, don't invest needed money, and definitely don't pause when things get scary. It really does seem like the recipe for just quiet long-term success. Hashtag 4.2, the invisible and compounding cost of waiting.
So we've spent a lot of time talking about the amazing upside of starting early, leveraging that long runway for compounding. Now we need to flip the coin and talk about the opposing force, because many people think that waiting, well, it feels safe, doesn't it? It feels like a neutral choice. I'm not losing anything if I just wait a bit longer.
Yeah.
But in the world of long-term, consistent investing, waiting is actually the single most expensive decision you can possibly make, even though that cost is completely invisible at first.
Yeah, you think, well, I haven't lost any money because I haven't put any in yet. But you're losing something far more valuable. You're losing time for that compounding magic to start working. And you can never get that lost time back.
Let's make this concrete again using our projection numbers. But this time, let's compare two hypothetical people. Okay, first we have individual A. Let's call her the action taker. She starts today, maybe she's 25. She commits to the simple $10 a week automated investment into a broad market ETF, and she plans to stick with it until she's 65. As we calculated, she contributes a total of $20,800 of her own money over those 40 years. And thanks to compounding, her final portfolio value is projected to be over $300,000.
Okay, solid plan, great result. Now let's bring in individual B. Let's call him the waiter. He hears all this, thinks it sounds good, but decides, you know what, I'll wait. I'll wait until my student loans are paid off. Or maybe I'll start once I get that next raise. Things are a bit tight right now. He delays starting for just 10 years. So he begins the identical $10 a week plan, same ETF, same automation, but he starts at age 35 instead of 25.
So when individual B, the waiter, reaches age 65, he's only been investing for 30 years instead of 40. That single lost decade of compounding right at the beginning, it has a devastating impact. His total principal contribution is lower, obviously only $15,600 because he invested for 10 fewer years. But the real damage is the dramatically shorter compounding window. His final portfolio value, assuming the exact same 8% average annual return, it lands somewhere around $139,000.
Whoa, hold on. $139,000 compared to over $300,000.
Right.
That's less than half. Individual A, just by starting 10 years earlier with the same tiny $10 a week, ended up with more than double the final amount, just purely because she gave her money more time to grow on itself.
Exactly, more than double. And here's the synthesis, the crucial takeaway from the sources on the cost of delay. For individual B, the waiter who started at 35, to reach that same $300,000 goal by age 65, he can't just invest $10 a week anymore. He's missed too much early growth. To catch up, he would need to invest roughly $22 every single week for those 30 years, more than double the weekly effort.
Wow. So just by waiting 10 years, by putting off that initial $10 investment for a decade, you essentially force your future self to work twice as hard financially, to save and invest $22 a week instead of $10 for the next 30 years, just to end up in the same place.
That's the invisible cost of waiting laid bare. It doesn't show up on your bank statement today, but it is a real, measurable cost that compounds negatively against you over time. It forces your future self to shoulder a much, much heavier burden. So the closing advice here really has to be hammered home. Start small, start early, and then just never stop. That $10 investment you make today, it is literally the cheapest investment you will ever make in your entire life because it buys you the maximum amount of time. Hashtag outro.
You know, we started this whole deep dive by acknowledging that feeling, that frustration that so much investment advice seems aimed at people who are already wealthy, leaving everyone else feeling shut out.
Nicole.
But the synthesis of everything we've looked at today, backed up by just the simple, undeniable power of math, delivers a completely different message, a really liberating one. You don't need to be rich first to start investing. It's the other way around. You start investing even with just $10 so that you can build that secure financial future, build real wealth one day. Even $10 is absolutely enough to begin that journey.
Yeah, true wealth, the kind that lasts. It's almost never built in those flashy, explosive, sudden gains you sometimes hear about. That's mostly speculative fantasy or just survivorship bias talking. Real wealth is built through those small, consistent, automated steps, repeated unemotionally, over long stretches of time. And honestly, the biggest enemy for a beginner, it's usually just overthinking it. getting stuck in analysis paralysis, waiting for the perfect moment, or saving up for the perfect amount, or finding the perfect platform.
The perfect moment is right now. The perfect amount to start with is $10. We've laid out the roadmap step by step. Find a low-fee platform, one that supports fractional shares. Pick just one simple, broad, diversified index ETF like VOO or VTI. Set up that automatic $10 weekly investment using dollar cost averaging. And then maybe the hardest part, walk away. Ignore the dairy noise. Trust the process. Let time and consistency do the heavy lifting for you. So, your concrete call to action right now, today, is just this. Take the first step. Choose a brokerage. Open the account. And set up that first automated $10 investment into your chosen ETF. Just watch. Watch how quickly the simple act of becoming an investor, shifting your identity from just being a saver, starts to change your mindset, your financial confidence, and ultimately your entire life's trajectory.
And look, we've really established the bedrock foundation today, that structure for potentially massive long-term growth. We've shown how that quiet, consistent $10 a week can realistically turn into over $300,000 across a lifetime. So once you've got that foundation successfully compounding away, the natural next step, the logical extension, is optimization. How do you build on that? The next question you should probably be asking yourself is, okay, how do I take the successful growth engine I built and start structuring my portfolio so it delivers not just long-term growth, but maybe my very first stream of consistent passive income? Now, that's an interesting question. And that's exactly what we'll dive into next time.